Revelation chapter 3. We're studying the 7 churches that Jesus addresses whenever John is given this revelation. He's on Patmos. You really can't see that, but I'm going to keep putting this up here every week in hopes that one week you'll just see this like you've never seen it before. Because that's wisdom. Patmos, that's where John was. Ephesus is addressed. Smyrna. Thyatira. Sardis, that's where we're at this morning. Philadelphia, and then the last one will be Laodicea. What I'd like to do is hit Laodicea, and then end this thing on a positive note. There's 2 congregations that Christ is complimentary of. And so we're gonna end it with the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not there yet. We got to go through Sardis and Laodicea first. A little bit of background about this city. It's actually, I didn't know this, the birthplace of modern money. It's the first time coins were minted. Didn't know that. Put that one in your pocket. Pun intended. Okay. That was bad. Known for their production of wool garments. They wonder if maybe whenever he talks about the robes that they put on, is that maybe, I don't know. We'll get to the passage later. We put on Christ and we're clothed with Christ, and there's a robe that's given to people, but also these people are shown later on in Revelation to have these, so I don't know. But yeah, they were known for their production of wool garments. Was known to be an impregnable fortress. So there's only one entrance to the south. This was kind of interesting. The way the city was built, you had a rock in every direction except for the southern entrance. That's how you could approach the city. And the story goes that the Persian king Cyrus in 549 is looking to take this territory where Sardis is. And a Persian soldier sees a Lydian soldier in Sardis drop his helmet. And the helmet fell down the cliff. And the Persian soldier watched the Lydian soldier scale down the cliff, get the helmet, and make his way back up. Forever they thought, you cannot scale these walls, and I just watch the soldiers scale it. And so he takes a band of soldiers with him, and was very meticulous about watching this guy, takes them up the wall, they scale the wall, and of course find that this portion of the city is totally unguarded. Why would you need to guard it? And so they fell overnight. Scholars think that this may be a reference whenever Jesus talks about coming to them like a thief in the night, perhaps. Although devil's advocate, that was like 600 years in their history. But the thing is that 300 years after that, it happened again. Someone scaled the sides. And for whatever it's worth, 2,000 years ago, at the time that this revelation is given, this city had a reputation of being a powerhouse as far as a fortress, but they could never deliver. And I want you to keep that in mind as we go forward. They had a reputation of being something, but they weren't. And everyone kind of knew that, and it was kind of to their embarrassment and shame. Okay, the history. So just going to go ahead and tell you right now, when we're looking at this congregation and the remaining ones, we just don't have a lot of history behind them. We don't know when they were founded. Again, we keep going back to either in Acts chapter 2, you had people from Asia and they took it back home. Maybe Paul, whenever he was in Ephesus for those couple of years, and everyone again in Asia heard. So we just don't know. All right. The text. And to the angel of the church in Sardis write. Again, the angel. Joel had asked me about this, and I've been meaning to bring it up, and I'm not trying to sidestep this one. So angel means messenger. There's been typically a few ways that people take it. Literally an angel, and we don't know what that means, or a messenger in the sense that someone at the congregation, it's maybe to that person who would read it aloud to the church. Some people think that it has to do with the representation of the character of the church. I don't know. I'm going to go with maybe just a messenger, someone who read it to him. I don't know. Not going to lose a lot of sleep on that one, but it is good to ask these questions because there's some different ideas out there. Although I do not, I do have to say this though. I do not believe in the idea that it was a leading bishop, which early commentators, like way back in the day, began to kind of throw that out there. By the way, you know what I forgot to tell you? Ephesus ended up crumbling traditionally. The history says is because they ended up giving in to a new form of church hierarchy. So that's kind of a bummer, isn't it, if that's correct? Anyways, the words of him who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. Coincidentally, last night around the dinner table, the kiddos were asking me this idea about God being all present, all knowing. We got the fancy terms for that I always mess up when I say, and all those. And I said, I don't think the point is that God literally has to be in every spot everywhere. But it's principles being taught about God. There's nothing that gets past God. And Cadence was like, yeah, what it's like? It's like God had eyeballs everywhere, all around his head, And I'm laughing. I said, funny thing you bring that up, because the words of him who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars, there are those that talk about the 7 spirits are the churches. But in Revelation, that's clearly debunked, because you have the 7 stars, which are the messengers. You have the 7 lampstands, which are the church. You have the 7 spirits, which is in the introduction, which seems to be clearly a reference to the Holy Spirit. You have the Son, the Father, and the Spirit represented. Going back in our history, you have some of this terminology being used. So Zerubbabel, in Zechariah, you got Zerubbabel, the people are trying to rebuild the temple of God, and they just think it's not going to happen. And God has this stone before the people that has 7 eyes on it, and he wants the people to look at it. Well, what is it? It's God seeing everyone. And he reiterates that, no, this is going to be completed. You can look at a passage I've got it there, 2 Chronicles 16:9, where it talks about God's eyes being everywhere, going to and fro. But here's the thing. So Jesus, he knows everything, and he sees everything. But just hang on to this one for a moment. He doesn't just see what you're doing. He sees what's going on in here, and he sees why you're doing it. My dad used to say, the great thing about God is that he knows my heart. He said, the terrifying thing about God is that he knows my heart. He sees everything. I know, so here's that statement, right, that he says to every congregation, I know your works. You have the reputation of being alive. If you're reading, I think maybe the New American, you have a name. Both great translations. They hit the nail on the head. You have a name, you have the reputation of being alive. He says, but you are goo, dead. Here's what's kind of interesting. I've been thinking about this. So this congregation, we're not told of any outside threats. We're not talking about, we don't mention, this Jezebel. We don't mention something like the Nicolaitans. We don't mention something like Balaam, the Satan's throne, or the synagogue of Satan. I'm not saying there wasn't, but Jesus doesn't mention any outside threat. With Ephesus, there was the one mention of the Nicolaitans, but I've noticed with Ephesus, with Laodicea, with this congregation that don't have a lot of outside threats, they've got internal struggles. I wonder too if one of the practical applications of that, realistically, is that 2,000 years ago, whenever your brothers and sisters in Christ, whenever they were keeping the faith, many of them were literally just trying to stay alive. And if that wasn't going to happen, they were trying to dig deep enough to keep the faith to be a martyr. But have you ever noticed sometimes in your life when everything is easy and there's no really heavy persecution, it's these internal struggles. We've said it a lot of times, it's like we got too much time on our hands. And then things like, you've left the love that you have at first. That's what I got to deal with you about. You're lukewarm. We'll get in that to Laodicea. I was so tempted to put Sardis and Laodicea together, but no, I think they deserve their own time. You have a reputation of being alive, but you're dead. Someone said reputation is what others say about you, but character is what one really is. So others were saying something about Sardis. They had a reputation. They were, I guess, impressive. Kind of interesting. And I was thinking about this idea of a reputation, a name. I didn't want to rush past this because out of all the things that Jesus says or doesn't say, it's like this is in there. And to me, I think that there's some significance about this. You have a reputation. My thinking is because we like to have a good reputation. Having a good name is important to me. Isn't it important to you? But then we ask that question, should it be important? I remember the first time kind of getting into this discussion, I had someone tell me, you don't need to be concerned about what others think. You know, Paul says, but with me, it's a very small thing that I should be judged by you or by any human court. In fact, I do not even judge myself. I thought all those were copy and paste, so that's weird. Okay. But then he'll write the church of Corinth again, and when he's talking about his ministry, he says, but what we are is known to God, and I hope it is known also to your conscience. Paul, as you read through his letters to the same church, he did want to have a good reputation among them. He did care, very much so, what they thought about him. He'll write to them, 2 Corinthians 8:21, for we aim what is honorable not only in the Lord's sight, but also in the sight of man. Read in between the lines. We want to have a good reputation. He told the saints in Rome, repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. Who cares? Give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. Listen, Proverbs says it this way, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold. Do we want to have a good name, a good reputation? Yes. I think that the next level, though, is why. Here's, at least for me, right? Why do I want a good reputation? Do I want a good name so that I am honored and I am praised, or because God is exalted? And I think that's what's so key to understanding these passages. Listen, it's a little thing to be judged by you. Oh, of course I want you to think well of me. But if I'm being judged by you, and unjustifiably so, that's irrelevant to me. God judges me. Oh, okay, that's the context. We want to do what's honorable in the sight of all. We want to have a good reputation because we are a child, a son and daughter of God, and we represent Him. And if we are held in honor, and they know who it is that we belong to, then God is held in honor. So yeah, we're very sensitive in that sense about everything we say and do. But here's what we're really getting to. We need to quit working for people's confirmation and validation. We struggle so hard, so many times, to seek approval from man. Seeking approval is almost just in you. But the moment that we forget who it is that matters, it creates all these problems in our life, one of them being a lack of sincerity. It makes things fake. It can. By the way, what makes a good church? I got to ask this one. What makes a good church? What gives a church a good name, good reputation? Well, there are 500 people. I think that says it all. Okay. Is that a bad thing? No. But that means that they're sincere? It could be that Jesus could say, hey, it sounds like you're feeding them the wrong bread. You remember at the end of John chapter 6, Jesus fed them the spiritual bread, and he's left with just a couple of handful of people. All I'm saying is that it doesn't necessarily mean that. They got lots of money coming in, pouring a lot of money out. Okay? I'm sure Ephesus did a lot of good things like that too, didn't they? But yet he says you let the love that you had at the beginning. Oh, they got a talented preacher. And listen, look at their monthly calendar. They've got so many Bible studies that they're offering. Again, I'll point you back to Ephesus. That's bad? No, that, by the way, could mean that something good is going on. But it doesn't prove anything. Jesus sees and he knows. This is a scary topic when you think about it, because whenever we get to congregations, I don't know if you're like me, but the ones that speak the most to me in these 7 churches are Ephesus, Sardis, and Laodicea. Because I don't have a ton of persecution going on. I got internal conflicts. The biggest enemy is me. That's the biggest enemy that I've got in my life many times, is me. You know who was in this kind of company with Sardis? Like Israel as a whole. They had a name, but they struggled being sincere. Whenever you get to Matthew 23, you know who had a great name among the people? The religious leaders, the Pharisees. And Jesus, it's the harshest rebuke in the New Testament. Well, at least one of them. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You look really good on the outside. He says, but guess what? There's bones. There's bones under that thing. And so it scares me. So we were talking about this with the kiddos last night, and if I may just share this with you. Jesus sees everything. He sees our motives. He knows what's behind the action. First and foremost, we have got to address this for your own salvation. Whenever you approach the throne of God one day, listen, we love you, but you are not going to answer him with North Collin. You will answer him alone. Here's another thing for those that are married. Your spouse needs to see sincerity. There's a lot of people, they call it playing church. They show up on Sunday. How are you doing, brother, sister? I was good to see you. Good to see you too. Loving the Lord. Loving the Lord. And then you go home and your family gets the scraps. And your wife gets the scraps. And your kids, and they see, those kids, they almost see as good as Jesus does. It's scary. You got to be there for your spouse. That when you go home, what you're doing, they see as sincere. What your kids are seeing, they see as sincere. We'll talk about lukewarmness. You see how it's so easy to cross over to that one, but hold off. But I'm talking about people that have a reputation. They put on the face and they're dead inside. So we were just talking about that with the kiddos. Hey, let's help encourage each other in that. Okay. He says, wake up and strengthen what remains and is about to die, for I have not found your works complete in the sight of my God. Remember then what you received and heard. Keep it and repent. If you'll not wake up, I'll come like a thief, and you will not know at what hour I will come against you. So wake up. Listen, he is their friend for saying, this is blunt. I mean, think about what he said. You have a reputation of being alive, but you're dead. And wake up. Goof. Proverbs says, better is open rebuke than hidden love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Whoever rebukes a man will afterward find more favor than he who flatters with his tongue. Let a righteous man strike me, it is a kindness. Let him rebuke me, it is oil for my head. Let my head not refuse it. obviously we don't like it whenever someone comes to us in a lack of love, and they're always, remember we talked about that. There's always, we've got a problem. I never see you unless you got a problem with me. So let's get rid of that. But the thing is that a wise man will see in his or her life that sometimes people just bring too much sugar in their lives. And they got a bad taste for it now. And in the moment, they liked him because they told him what they wanted to hear. But they began to have respect for them because they realized it was in love that they try to help them. A lot of people in life that are going to tell us what we want to hear and give us the greatest reputation and the greatest feeling in the world. I love those of you, and I mean like here, because there's several that have shown me some tough love. And that have said, hey, stop it, or snap out of it, or gird your loins, man. You know, all these different areas. All these different areas, because I'm like, okay, well, there was a friend. And that's who Jesus was to them. And you got to strengthen each other. Strengthen what remains. It's like there's something there, but let's get back to it and let's build on that. Jesus isn't trying to break people down. He's trying to build them up. But I guess that's the question, right? Do we challenge each other to grow? And I know, to be specific, how and who is doing that? Am I willing to, as we talked about this morning in class, be vulnerable enough to be open? That's a hard thing to do. And also, am I willing to? And he says, I'm going to come like a thief. Later on in Revelation chapter 16, 15, he says, behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake, keeping his garments on, that he may not go about naked and be seen exposed. I don't think that what Jesus is talking about is a second coming. I think his coming in these passages, if you go back and you read the text, they're conditional. Keep it and repent. If you will not wake up, I will come like a thief. There's a punishment that Jesus will pour out that people experience. Not only in the after, but now. He says, yet you still have a few names in Sardis, people have not soiled their garments, and they will walk with me in white, for they are worthy. The one who conquers, here's his conquering statement, will be clothed thus in white garments, and I will never blot his name out of the book of life. I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So again, as I already mentioned, we all appear before the throne of God independently. I've said that. There is a warning, okay? Just a reminder, though, whenever we're going through this, be careful. Remember Jude, have mercy on those who doubt, save others by snatching them out of the fire. To others show mercy with fear, hating even the garment stained by the flesh. And I think that's the idea that he has here. People who have not soiled their garments. He's talking about their sin. He's talking about this issue. He realizes that that's not everyone. Just warning and a reminder, though, but be careful, because sin is sin is sin. Well, it is and it isn't. You got to know who you're talking to and what's going on and how to approach it. You don't approach everyone in the same manner every time. But in this one, Jesus is saying there's a major issue. And I know who has soiled their garment and who has not. The book, this is a really, if you want to nerd out, you can't. I'm not going to get into it all, but maybe do it this week. If you're struggling with something, look at all the passages through the whole Old and New Testament that talk about this book of life. Moses will talk about it. You got Paul talking about it. What I think is beautiful, though, is that to me, big picture, God knows you. Again, how many times we say this? He knows your name, and you are not forgotten, and it is recorded. But again, he holds this authority. Who's in the book and who's not? Confession. This was a beautiful reminder for me. We always talk about confessing Jesus Christ. But Jesus says, I want to confess you to the Father. I want to confess you before the heavenly host. Isn't that principally? No, I don't think that's principally. I'm going to confess her. I'm going to confess him to my Father, because Jesus is the advocate. And so finally, let's not forget. So if there's someone here this morning, and if you allow me to be blunt like Jesus was, and hopefully that I'll be found to have a love, not as great as a love as he, but a love for you. If you're having a reputation among us, if you're putting on a mask, but Jesus knows that person is dead. Can we encourage you just to come to grips with that and wake up? Because the thing is, we don't want what could come to you. I don't want that to come to me if that's what's going on in my life. We are here as your spiritual family to strengthen you. I leave with you Luke 15. This parable, it's the prodigal son. It's actually not about the younger son who goes away. In context, this is about the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled because he was eating with sinners and tax collectors. They weren't rejoicing at how Jesus was bringing people into his fold. In the parable of the prodigal son, it's really actually about the older son. The younger son leaves, takes his inheritance, squanders all of it, finds himself eating with the pigs. You remember this one. Says, I got to go back to my father, and I got to confess what I've done. And we come to Luke chapter 15, verse 20. And he arose and came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. They're having steaks. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found, and they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and he came and drew near to the house. He heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back and safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in, and his father came out and entreated him. And they had this conversation. The man that says, the older brother was outside staking his claim, while the younger brother was inside claiming a stake. We want to claim stake with you, okay? We want to rejoice with you. So would you do that if you need to?